Hello everyone, my name is Chris Titley and welcome to the Fintech Australia podcast. The Fintech Australia podcast takes listeners on a deep dive across the fintech industry in Australia, focusing on the challenges, opportunities and big stories our community faces. Let's get to today's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here. As part of the Fintech Australia podcast series, I'm joined by Ada Guan, co-founder of RichDataCo. Ada, thanks so much for being part of this podcast.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the opportunity.
RichDataCo, let's tell us about the business, the history, the origins of the business, and going back to the early days, how it all began.
Yeah. So RichDataCo is actually we call RDC, about 8 years old. So we founded on 29th of February back in 2016. So we can really celebrate our birthday every 4 years. So we have the 8th one coming up.
That's right. And I've got some friends that are turning, what are they turning? 12, 48, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we're turning 2 or turning 8. So it was founded with, we have 4 co-founders, and Gordon Campbell, who you might know, came with me from Oracle. We both have an Oracle background. Michael Kumar, who's our chairman, has a long banking background, with Net background, and also HP background. And Charles Guan, who is our CTO, you should also know, is my brother, and come out of New South Wales government. So 4 of us founded the business 8 years ago, with a very strong belief on data and AI actually going to change how we live our lives. So we started the AI journey quite early. So we started to really using behavior data to understand customer behavior, and especially in the financial services, in the lending decisioning space. And so we like to call ourselves AI decisioning capability platform provider. So we provide AI decisioning capability or for banks to make complex decision, high quality complex decision safely and efficiently. So that's what we've been focusing on.
In terms of the sort of lending platform and the intricacies, as well as the variables that go into it, I'd imagine there's an easily straightforward loan process, but then there's a very complex one. How do you kind of go about that and getting that data set to kind of refine it lender by lender?
Yeah, so we're largely working with banks, and the domain we're focusing a lot on is business and commercial lending. So if you look at the AI platform provider and for lending decisioning, a lot of the players actually focusing on consumer lending space. Well, we also have the capability. We decided to focus a lot more around business and commercial lending. The core reason for that is business lending facing a slightly different issue compared to consumer lending. It's faced what we call a small data issue and also a complex data issue. Because to understand the lending decision is actually really a risk assessment decision, right? So what risk I'm willing to take in order to lend you the money. To understand the risk, and from business lending perspective, we need to look at each individual segment. So agriculture, you can't look at agriculture the same way as you're looking at retail. So when you do that, the number of records become quite small. So that's why we call it a small data issue. And also complex data issue, because the data relating to a business is vast. So in that sense, how to use the right data set, understanding the behavior. We use a lot of transaction data, and such as your banking transaction account information, and understand often the cash flow strengths of that business. And then the understanding the cash flow, which is the lifeblood of the business, then trigger a whole bunch of very interesting use cases or solutions, such as early warning, and to identify customers who are in distress early, and such as conditional limit, means identify customers actually make sure the banks has a limit available for that customer when they need it. And automating review. So banks under regulatory control has to do risk review every year. How to automating that process, not purely rely on financial statement. So the list goes on. It's become quite interesting quite interesting way of how to look at business and the commercial lending in the holistic way, and looking at both origination, which is I think bank called front book, and also existing customer, which is they call back book.
Before we talk about the growth of the business over the last 8 years or so, I'm curious as to know when the business started to become a B2B play and getting these large-scale institutions to use your product, how that sales process went. Was it a slow-moving beast, and did you have some sort of, longer-term kind of play in terms of like, well, actually, it's going to take us a year to get to our first banking customer? Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, the truth to be told, as typical startup, we went through a lot of pivot, right? So we often wanted to talk about the green box story, which is a green demo box sitting in the office now, and which has the full demo capability for a smart home solution. So RDC when we first started, we had two business. One is lending decisioning, which we're currently doing. We also were selling smart home solution into Vietnam market.
Right. Okay. Some smart lights and fridges that can turn off automatically, etc. Kind of a far-fetched miles away from what you're currently doing. So when was the pivotal moment? Excuse the pun.
Yeah, the pivotal moment is I think we actually have a fully fledged solution in the first couple of years of our life. And we sold some product into Vietnam as well. And we have a full demo. So if you search internet, you actually might find a full demo of a video of our smart home solutions. However, what we realized is you really can't work in the IoT domain at the same time working in financial services. So the team is brilliant. They can create any solution we can imagine. But on the other side, we're too unfocused. And we were tackling both. I think the conversation, come out with discussion with one of my mentors. You kind of like saying you have credentials in financial services because you've always been working in financial services. You bring a solution to market, people actually believe it. What's your credential on IoT? Who is on your team actually had IoT experience? Plus, you're competing with the Google, the Amazon, and all
the
that.
large-scale corporate
What's your backing around this?
Yeah, interesting. Oh, wow. There you go. That's a bit of fintech trivia for the next trivia night, I suppose, in terms of a former life of a company that people now know is in AI credit decision-making. Now, let's talk about the growth of the business. And in particular, last year or the last couple of years, we sort of obviously seen some, a rise in lending during the COVID period, and then probably a little bit of a consolidation in some areas in 23. Do you want to discuss the last couple of years?
Yeah, of course. So we have grown quite significantly for the last couple of years. So if you look at RDC as a typical business, we perhaps started lack of experience, not very super focused. And COVID actually brought, in a way, is the best thing and what thing happened and really forced us to focus. To say, okay, which area you're really going to get super good at and which region or market you're really going to focus on. So that very much push us back to Australia and really, really focusing on business and commercial lending. And that helped us to sharpen our play in the domain and really started to grow that market. That's when we started to see business went through quite significant growth in the last 3 years. And so COVID actually is in many ways the pivot moment and help us to really focus on really growing. So we're growing well in the Australia and the New Zealand market, which we're super excited about. And more importantly, we have entered the US market in the last 12 months, and we're progressing really well as well. So, which are very, very exciting.
I remember doing a profile on your company a couple of years ago, and you were very, very strong on AI. AI was mentioned in all your terminology. And then we had this sort of mainstream moment with ChatGPT probably coming on a year and a bit ago, where everyone on the streets probably going, I can use ChatGPT, and AI is taking over the world. And we've had this plethora of funding into AI startups. Can I talk about your experience with AI, how it's been embedded into your business and how you see that moving forward, going on to those comments you mentioned earlier about AI and data?
Yeah. So AI first, I think from a lending decisioning perspective, we start using AI in the lending decisioning space 8 years now. So although we were not very focused, but we were really testing out how the AI really can make an impact in lending decision. I can say from our test perspective, even 8 years ago, it's showing really strong promise and really in the risk assessment space compared to traditional method. So I think the difference perhaps is 8 years ago, we need to demonstrate how AI is better than traditional method. Now it's a lot less so. I think it's a lot more people taking it as something already proven versus you really going back to the very basics. There is a lot of excitement on AI. On the other side, there's also a lot of misconception on AI as well. There are people saying GPT is going to kill the world, and there are people saying that's the best thing ever happened. I think the reality perhaps is somewhere in between, and the GPT is only one part of AI. It's not the whole part of AI. GPT is not AI. AI is such a broad concept, have so many different branches within AI. Generative AI is part of it, not the whole.
Yep. And then the plans for 2024 for RDC, you talked about that US expansion. I mean, that's a big leap from the local area with different regulations and different, I suppose, criteria from, there's so many more banks over there as well. So how's that going, and what are the plans for 24?
Yeah. So one is super excited in terms of the market size. So US has 5,000 banks, very different scale compared to Australia. The way we're going to market is we're partnering with a company called nCino, and so they are a listed company in NASDAQ, and in the domain we play in terms of business lending and the commercial lending space, they are the leader globally. So they have I think last time was 2,700 banks as their customer.
Wow.
Yeah, so they have the exact number I can't quite remember, but for the banks forcing into the domain we're targeting is probably around 400. They are a fantastic partner, and so we partner together to take the core AI capability to market. So that means we have an agreement for nCino to distribute our product. So I think that for us, that's a super exciting path, and it hasn't come easy. I think nCino did a global search before they chose RDC, but they are such a strong partner for us. There's a very high trust between the two organizations, and I think you'll see some exciting news to come in the over the next few months.
Before we go into sort of areas around fintech locally and the importance of Fintech Australia, one question that I've got for you is around that US expansion. Did you think from the beginning of the business that it was always going to be a global business, or did you think that this has sort of come organically?
I think it was always going to be a global business. So I think for me, my background was I have a banking background locally, and then I went to Oracle. I was doing a global role. So the global role I did really open up my eyes in terms of how big the globe is and how many opportunities are available in different markets. And working in that environment, I realized that's where I wanted to play. So from RDC setup perspective, we set up on day one. So that's why the first few years of RDC Lab is actually not in Australia. Very different from many startups in the local market. We actually started overseas. We were doing work in Asia. We're doing work in North America. And that's why we're not well known in the local market until probably more recently. So I think we always set out to be a global business. That's our ambition. We're delivering to it.
And Ada, 2023 was a little bit of a rough year for fintechs on the funding side. I've seen some stats today saying it was probably, maybe 70% down from last year. It's been a bit of a tough time. But this is the Fintech Australia podcast, and Fintech Australia runs some events through the year, including Intersect, their flagship festival, and also the Finnies. Can you talk about your involvement with Fintech Australia and what you're seeing locally in amongst the fintechs at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. First, a big shout out to Fintech Australia. So I think we were part of the delegate Fintech Australia, and Australia took to New York back in May 2022 when we actually entered the North American market. So I've been working with the team quite closely since then, and the boot camp in New York, the 2 weeks in New York, and actually helped to launch RDC into the global market.
I do remember that. That's right. Yeah, I remember that. There's a couple of other fintechs that went over there too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Assurance Lab, WeMoney, so was in our cohort,
Yep.
and the guys are doing really well as well. We're actually currently doing business with Assurance Lab as well. They're doing our SOC
there you go.
compliance
Goes back
audit.
to the US heritage of the Austrade trip. Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So I wanted to shout out to Fintech Australia, and Stu King, I think, is the community manager there, and who has always been super supportive and for our business, which we acknowledge and appreciate. And in terms of the market, I think since the time we went to New York with Fintech Australia was back in May 22. That's the time we started to see the market turn. I remember that's the time we started thinking about raising and actually decided to delay it because the market was changing and turning. And that hasn't been an easy year or easy 18 months or 2 years now for fintechs. And the overall market, I think, is pretty tight. And we have seen from investor perspective, I think they have a term called flight to quality. So the due diligence, the selection is a lot tighter than before. And the good news is, I mean, the flying quality means quality fintech will still get funded. It's just tougher than before.
Yep. No, certainly agree on that, Ada. Thank you so much for giving us a bit of an update on the history of RDC, including its roots in an IoT company, the US trip and how that's sort of turned, and as well as the progress that you've seen thus far, and also the macro trends of AI and how you're overlaying that in your business. I wish you all the best and congratulate you on what you've achieved thus far here locally as well as the US, and really look forward to catching up at future events.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Australia podcast. I'm your host, Chris Titley. The Fintech Australia podcast is a collaboration between Fintech Australia and Sub11. For more information about membership options, news and the events coming up, jump on to the Fintech Australia website. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.